Well, Rising Up the Alums focuses on a community group named Deshi's Rising Up and Moving, or DRUM. And they were a group of immigrant, low-income South Asian community that was responding to a lot of issues that were affecting them. And then particularly after 9/11, people were being targeted for deportation. And they had special registration, which was this program where you had to show up. Like 80,000 people had to report to register as basically immigrants and how they entered, why they entered, and a lot of them were deported as a result of special registration, or they're served with deportation orders because of anything that was wrong with their immigration history. So that was what the context where I was making this film. I was really interested in what was happening after 9/11 and wanted to speak with a community that was really active and taking a very active role to organizing against these things the government was doing and not being helpless, but really taking a stand. And so they were doing a lot of political work, but also legal work to help their communities. And at that point, they were getting ready for the Republican National Convention, and they wanted to make a big stand to show that they did not accept this platform that the Republican Party was about and what George Bush was doing, along with Attorney General John Ashcroft. And I just was captivated by this spirit of resistance that they had, and that has been really the theme of my work since then. Because of my family history, I was always aware that my parents were incarcerated during World War II in a system of war relocation camps that they built, which were in fact concentration camps that the United States built because they wanted to remove all the Japanese descended people from the West Coast. It was based on this idea that there was going to be a threat, there was never any evidence that anyone was going to commit any kind of espionage or sabotage or terrorism back then, but that was the narrative that the government was pumping out. And basically it was based on a lot of racism, economic racism, just the fact that the Japanese had become successful in farming. So California had a lot of anti-Japanese and anti-Asian, feeling, and so that's what caused a lot of political pressure to get the Japanese off the West Coast after Pearl Harbor, which was, of course, the 9/11 of that day, when people basically gave the political will to do enact a lot of racist government programs to detain, remove, harass, investigate people from certain ethnic communities. The question of what to do with refugees has been batted around, and it comes back to the idea that we have to vet people in this broad way. We need to kind of weed out the good from the bad, and that's what I'm up to in my current project on Tule Lake, which was a place where, of all the 10 camps they created, the 10 concentration camps were created for Japanese Americans. And when the United States government realized, okay, the war is ending, we really have to close out these camps. It's their embarrassment. We have to find a way to gracefully exit this incarceration program without admitting that there was no reason to do it in the first place. So what they did was they came up with a loyalty questionnaire where they attempted to weed out the good from the bad. And they basically asked you, well, will you serve in the United States military, and will you forswear your allegiance to the Japanese emperor? And these were problematic questions. The first one was problematic because they didn't tell you where you would serve or anything like that. So you could be over there fighting your cousin. So they didn't have any respect for where you might be coming from as a transnational person with these transnational families of mixed status. They didn't call it mixed status back then, but they had excluded a whole generation of Japanese Americans from citizenship. The people who came over, which we call the Issei, the first generation, were just barred from assimilating or getting citizenship by racist laws they had at the time. So they're putting these questions to a community of people whose parents were not citizens. And so they're asking them to forswear allegiance to the Japanese emperor, which if you were born in the United States, you probably never had allegiance to the emperor in the first place. And so that was a ridiculous question. And then, on the other hand, if you thought you might have to go back to Japan because you had lost your whole future because your farm was taken away by this whole racist exclusion, then you might have to go to Japan with your parents, and in which case, to have forsworn allegiance to Japan would be a mistake. So they put people in a terrible position. It was a completely, just a ridiculously clumsy, if not just outright sadistic policy to visit on these people who were sitting in concentration camps. 110,000 people. And then the adults had to answer this question. So this was one way that the government tried to weed out the good from the bad. So the history of the government trying to weed out good immigrants from bad immigrants has never gone very well, and it tends to result in destroying people's lives, detaining people, denying people human rights of moving to living in a safe place. And that's basically what people are just talking about in their political aspirations, just doing these kinds of things again, basically.